Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Nadia Massi. Here are the top stories on the continent tonight. Fears of fresh unrest in Kenya ahead of major protests against the government led by the opposition leader Raila Odinga. Coming up, we'll get an update from our correspondent in Nairobi. As the conflict rages in Sudan, we look at the economic impact of the war on neighbouring Kar, where many are dependent on supplies from across the border. And from abortion rights to Afrofeminism, we head to Rwanda as it gears up to host this year's Women Deliver conference. But first, our top story. Kenya is bracing for 3 days of anti-government protests this week. The demonstrations are being organised by the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, who accuses the government of failing to control a cost of living crisis. Last week, the President, William Ruto, who defeated Odinga in the general election, warned the rallies will not be allowed to go ahead. And in line with previous protests, there is a significant risk of violence this week, as our correspondent Bastien Renouy now reports.
The opposition is calling Kenyans to take to the streets at noon this Wednesday to make as much noise as possible by banging cooking pots to show their opposition to the government. And I can tell you that here in Kenya, many are against these demonstrations. Some have tried to use justice to prevent the demonstrations, but the High Court refused to declare it illegal. Members of the government have tried to intimidate members of the opposition during the past few days. They say that they will be responsible in case of violences that are really likely to occur this Wednesday, given what happened during the past 2 weeks. At least 13 people have been killed, some of them by the police, and millions of euros of damage have been caused by the demonstrators on both public and private properties. Opposition leaders say that they are not responsible for that their demonstrations are peaceful, and that the government is anti-democratic, that the government is hiring goons to create chaos and to be violent during the demonstrations in order to discredit the opposition. So what will happen next? Well, according to The Nation, which is one of the leading newspapers here in Kenya, talks are ongoing between the opposition and the government, even if opposition leaders say that no, it's not the case, that the demonstration will continue until the government finds solutions to the rising cost of living. They say that they're ready to demonstrate for the next 2 months if necessary.
Now, meanwhile, in Sudan, the RSF paramilitary has taken control of a town in Darfur, forcing thousands of residents to flee. They're just the latest civilians to have been displaced in the 3-month conflict between the RSF and Sudan's army. In total, over 650,000 civilians have fled their homes in Darfur since the middle of April. Across Sudan, that number stands at over 3 million. And experts say the ethnic attacks in Darfur do mirror those employed in the early 2000s by the Janjaweed, a militia which the RSF grew out of. Well, the conflict in Sudan is having an impact beyond the country's borders. Our next report takes us to Birao in the Central African Republic. The city relies on supplies from Sudan, but traffic has been badly disrupted since the war began, causing a sharp increase in the price of food. Justice Badao has the report.
It's 11 a.m. at the Martyrs Monument, a building at the entrance to the Birao Central Market. In this mall, there is concern among shopkeepers and shoppers as food prices continue to rise. The inflation weighs heavily on the wallets and the daily lives of the people.
The Sudanese conflict really worked against us. Everything is expensive. We bought a liter of gasoline at 1,500 francs CFA, and now it's 3,500. The bag of sugar, which usually costs 25,000, currently costs 100,000.
Here in his place of work, Adam Idris receives few customers. This trader is aware of the challenges they face. His hope now hangs on the rehabilitation of roads and the restoration of security in the region.
Traders want to import goods, but they're not safe. We need protection. I asked the government and MINUSCA to provide us with a cargo plane to facilitate the transport of goods.
The local authorities seem distraught and have no immediate solutions to offer.
It is Sudan and Chad that supply us here in Birao. Unfortunately, the Bangui-Birao road is in a pitiful state in addition to insecurity. We have to sort out what needs to be done.
In Birao, activities are slowing down because everything has become expensive. The Central African government promises to create an air bridge between Bangui and Birao this month to bring goods twice a week to the city.
Now in other news, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has said any attempt to arrest Vladimir Putin when he visits the country next month would be a declaration of war against Russia. The Russian president has been invited to a summit in Johannesburg in August, even though he is the target of an international arrest warrant by the ICC. South Africa is a signatory to the International Criminal Court and should therefore, in theory, help in his arrest. But in court documents released this Tuesday, Ramaphosa described that as irresponsible, arguing national security was at stake. Now, a court in Egypt has found a researcher guilty of spreading false news and sentenced him to 3 years in prison. Patrick Zaki was convicted over an article he wrote about his life as a Coptic Christian. He was arrested at Cairo airport in 2020 when returning from studying in Italy. The judgment cannot be appealed, and human rights groups have strongly condemned his conviction. Now, at least 80% of the working-age population of Guinea-Bissau depends directly or indirectly on the cashew nut industry to earn a living. Now, this year's harvest season is drawing to a close and the sector is in crisis. Farmers and exporters disagree on what constitutes a fair price, and many are struggling to make ends meet, as our team in the country now reports.
Guinea-Bissau's economy is almost entirely reliant on cashew nut production, which accounts for more than 90% of all legal exports and employs most of the working-age population. This dependence on cashew nuts has its downsides. The country is vulnerable to falling commodity prices, and this year the situation is particularly bad. Farmers like Philomena are among the worst hit.
I'd rather stockpile my nuts and sell them to exporters later, when the market rate is better. I need 3 kilograms of rice every day to feed my family. But at the current price, my stock of nuts will only get me 2 sacks. This rainy season is a time of poverty for us.
The government has set a legal minimum price for cashew nuts, but in reality this is often ignored. Cashew nut exporters say that high taxes mean they have no choice but to ask for low prices from the farmers.
This year they've reduced taxes a little bit, but for exporters it's still not enough. When it comes to the political framework surrounding the commercialization of nuts, there's much left to be desired.
For now, Guinea-Bissau exports cashew nuts as a raw, unprocessed material. Officials want to develop processing capacities in Bissau for things like roasting, peeling and packaging to add to the value chain.
This year's export season is not going well, partly because of international speculation, but also because of speculation within the country itself. It's impacting negatively on the lives of our population. The solution is that we process it locally. We've signed a protocol with Brazil and China, who've promised to install a processing plant for the short term. Their experts came to visit.
The ongoing crisis in Guinea-Bissau's cashew sector will be one of the main challenges facing the country's new parliament, scheduled to open before the end of the month.
Now, abortion rights, the gender pay gap and Afrofeminism, just some of the issues to be discussed at this week's 6th Women Deliver conference being held in Kigali, Rwanda. The discussions are global in scope, but this year does focus in particular on Africa, as Clement Di Roma now reports.
Thousands of delegates from around the world gather in Kigali to assess the advancements made in enhancing women's rights globally, with a particular emphasis on Africa. Domestic violence, abortion rights, Afrofeminism and women in positions of power are just a few topics covered in the 6th edition of Women Deliver. This conference also stands out as the first to provide a rare platform for LGBTQI+ activists, taking place in a region of Africa where homophobic laws are becoming increasingly prevalent.
Women are not one thing. We are diverse. We have different colors, backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, and it's just been so beautiful seeing each of the different women expressing themselves in their diversity, and not just in my country, Uganda, but also in other countries where we're having laws coming up that are making it harder for women at the margins who are structurally excluded to see themselves as part of gender equality, of the gender equality strategic development goals.
While Rwanda does not have anti-LGBT+ laws, neighbouring countries have enacted such legislations. Uganda, for example, recently passed a highly supported anti-LGBT+ law imposing penalties of up to 20 years in prison for individuals accused of promoting homosexuality, and in certain cases even the death penalty. Nearby Kenya is also attempting to pass a comparable law, claiming to safeguard families, a move condemned by human rights advocates.
Clement Di Roma for us there. And we end the programme in an ancient city that's in modern-day Libya. The Greeks called it Ptolemais, and today it's the Libyan village of Tolmetia. Olivia Bizot takes us there to the excavations currently ongoing.
Remnants of the splendour of an era. This ancient settlement of Ptolemais in Libya was uncovered about 20 years ago by Polish archaeologists. However, their excavation was put on pause in 2011 when the Libyan revolution broke out. Today, they're back, more determined than ever.
The Polish mission is here. They came to continue the work that they began in 2001. Their mission was put on pause when the revolution broke out in 2011. They had stored their excavation equipment, pottery and antique coins here at the museum.
The Polish team has been busy restoring these artifacts, discovered during their previous mission here. They've also recently excavated this collection of over 300 ancient coins, which they're hoping will help answer important questions about what life was like in the ancient Greek city. Ptolemais, or Tolmeta as it's now called, is located on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea in northeastern Libya. It was a prominent settlement for more than 1,000 years, from the 3rd century BC to the 7th century AD.
Excavations are very important for Polish archaeology, for Polish scholars, because Ptolemais, Tolmeta, is one of the biggest and most important port cities in the African shore during the Greek and Roman period.
The excavation is expected to continue for another 5 years. The revealed secrets will be published in a book.
And that's a wrap for Eye on Africa this evening. Thank you for watching.